Hey, what's going on, producers? In this video, I'm going to show you my workflow to mix and master music very quickly. I do my thing in a very specific way, and this works for me so well because I'm able to crank out tracks, especially from the mixing and mastering side, very quickly following this 4-phase mixing workflow. So if you've been struggling with mixing and mastering your music and doing things maybe out of sequence, or sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't get it right, it takes you way too long, this video is going to be absolutely amazing for you. I taught this live to some of my private coaching students, and right now I'm just going to give you the gems absolutely for free in this video. Definitely take your notes because this is going to be awesome for you, and let's get right into it.
What I want to do today, guys, is I want to talk about the 4-phase mix process, okay? And what do I mean by this? A lot of the times when we finish creating our track and we go to mix, I feel like workflow, we all know that workflow is incredibly important, and workflow at every single stage of the game is really what leads to efficiency. It's what leads to you getting things done well, but not only well, getting things done fast, right? And being able to be confident in being able to get it done well and get it done fast. And yes, you're going to run into hiccups because, you know, every song is different and whatever. We're also human, but having a workflow that you can trust, that you can do every time, is I can't say enough about it. Recently, I had to mix a lot of songs in a very short period of time. A lot of unfinished material that I had, that literally the creation was done, or just like 95% done. It just wasn't mixed, and I had to finish it like really fast. And so I started mixing a lot. I actually bought a pair of VSX headphones because they kind of model different studios and whatever, and they've helped a lot too. But in doing that, I kind of organically really dialed in this workflow that has been really working for me. And I realized that I'm doing different things in phases. And it kind of compartmentalizes the different things that I'm doing, and it allows me to super focus on this and get it done, and then move on to the next thing, kind of wipe my hands like, I know this is good, let me go on to this. Wipe my hands. I know this is good, let me move on to this. So now when I run into issues with the mix, it's really easy for me to pinpoint where the thing might have been, where the problem is. And even if I'm not running into problems, like, it just allows me to get done so much quicker. It says 4-phase mix, but I mean like 4-phase mix and master, you know, this entire process, the 4-phase production process. So what I want to do is I want to write down the 4 phases, and then maybe I'll talk about each one a little bit in depth. So phase number 1 is EQ. Phase number 2, effects, refinement, balance. So this is a personal thing that I do, okay? You don't have to do this. But I find that it really helps me. So it may really help you, or some form of this, and maybe you can play with it and see what works for you really well. Phase 3 is master, and phase 4 is details. This works for me, like I said. This may feel backwards for some people. For me, it feels excellent. So what do I mean by these 4 phases? Let me kind of dive deep into here. First thing that I do when I mix, when I'm done creating the song, you know, it's flowing from beginning to end. I've recorded all my parts. You know, I have all my snares where I want them. I have all my kicks where I want them. I have the chord progressions. Like the creation process is done. Now I'm going into the sonic world to make it all sit and hit nice and pretty, right? So that's where this workflow begins. So that's where I'm starting. So the first thing I do, the very first thing I do, is I bring it to mono. I bring it to mono, and that's the very first thing I do. Why do I do that? Because when you bring it to mono, everything is going to be right on top of each other. So when you're producing, there's 2 degrees of separation. There's your panning, and then there's your frequency. So there's your EQ. So it's direction, and then there's frequency. When you put it in mono, you take away the direction. When you put it in mono, you take away the direction. So now everything is right on top of each other. So when you EQ in mono, if you can't hear something, it's not because it's too low, it's not because it's too left, it's not because it's in the center, it's because it doesn't have its own space frequency-wise, you know? So as you're EQing in mono, make sure that you can hear everything very, very clearly. And then you know that your EQs are dialed in and nothing's rubbing against each other. So what I'll do is I'll literally, and usually, or not usually, I always start with my kick, and I always start with my main elements, and then I go from there. So I'll do my kick, then I'll EQ my snare, then I'll do my bass, then I'll do my main instrument, then I'll do my hats, my percussion, then I'll do my pads, then I'll do, you know, whatever. And then I just add things up from there. I build things up from there. And all the while that I'm doing this, it's still in mono, and I'm making sure that I can hear everything clearly. So dude, this is vital. This is super, super, super important. So that's the first thing I'll do. I'll EQ and get everything super clear. And then as I'm doing this, I'm also, you know, balancing just to obviously make sure that things feel like they're at a good volume as well. Once I feel like I have a good EQ, let's do this in red, I move on to phase 2, which is effects, refinement, and balance. What do I mean by this? It's mainly balance, but also the effects refinement is in here as well. So let me talk about balance first. So with balance, this is where I'm making sure that everything is balanced. I'm just kind of making sure that everything sits correctly. Nothing is too loud, nothing is too soft. Always thinking like the 3 tiers. What are my focal point instruments? What are my supportive instruments? What's my ear candy? And it's just kind of making sure that all that stuff is right. Some of that work is done in mono because, you know, you want to, but when you unfold it to stereo, things get a little bit different. And you're also able to hear more of the reverb, and you're able to hear things move when they're panning. So, you know, just kind of refining those levels and getting a clear balance. And when I say effects refinement, what I mean is really dialing in how much reverb something has or how little reverb something has, how much delay or how little delay something has. Maybe I'll even tweak the EQ a little bit more because I hear it in stereo, or you know, maybe this thing has some distortion and I want to give it some more distortion, or, you know, I have some certain effect on the piano that's making it sound like retro or whatever, and I'll really just dial that in so it's perfect the way that I want it, or as close to perfect as possible, right? And just, you know, anything that's effecty, you know, just making it, just dialing it in. Because a lot of times when we're creating, we kind of just, you know, throw some delay on something and throw like our favorite plug-in on something so that we can make it sound, you know, like a radio or whatever. But we don't get it perfect, we just kind of get it there. So during this stage, I really dial in, I really refine that, the effects that I'm putting on certain instruments. And then I balance everything and then until it feels right. This is very simple, and if you've heard me talk for any length of time, you've heard me talk about the 3-tier system when it comes to balance. And so let me just kind of put that in parentheses as well. And when I say, that's how you spell tier, right? Cool. I'm a musician. And so tier, 3 tiers. And so the 3 tiers are: number 1, my focal point instruments. Those should be the loudest. Number 2, my supportive instruments. Those should not be as loud. And number 3, my ear candy. That can be not as loud, or that can be, you know, really coming at you because you want to surprise them, whatever it may be. And so that's, you know, those are my first 2 phases. Number 1, make sure the EQ is dialed in. Unfold it. Number 2, make sure everything is balanced. Now, here is where my process gets a little bit different. A lot of people work out the details in the balance stage. But just with the way that I like to listen, I don't know if it's the way I like to listen or just in the way that I've come to do it, I guess you can say. Once I have a nice balance, I then go into master. And when I go into master, this means whole track tweaks, I guess you can say, for lack of a better word. So for those who are unaware of exactly what the difference between mixing and mastering is, mixing, basically from a very simplistic view, mixing is when you're mixing the individual elements. So the kick, the snare, the bass, the pad, the synth, the piano, right? When you're mastering, you're messing with the entire organism. You're messing with the entire track. So you're bringing up the low end, you're bringing down the low end, you're cutting the mids, you're bringing up the highs of the whole track. So when you bring up the highs, you're bringing up the highs of the piano, you're bringing up the hi-hats, you're bringing up the highs of the snare, right? When you're bringing up the low end, you're bringing up the kick and you're bringing up the bass, you know? And so that's the difference between mixing individual tracks, mastering a whole track itself is one living organism. And so when you think about it like that, you can really start to diagnose like, what is the issue? Is this really a mixing issue or is this a mastering issue? So then I'll go to master. And the reason that I do this is because once I have a nice balance, before I work out the details of like automation and I want there to be a little crescendo here before the drop or whatever it may be, or like, you know, sometimes when you're singing, like one note is like really loud or like one note is really soft, and so you want to turn up the volume and turn down the volume just so that you get this really nice even dynamic level. Before working out those details, I actually like to master. And the reason I do that is because I want to make sure, and I'm mostly making hip hop and R&B and Latin music. So I want to make sure that when everything hits, when it gets to that drop, it feels good. Like it feels as close to the final that it's going to be. And I'm mastering it and I'm making it like, when that drop comes in, I want everything to be balanced at that drop. I want the track to be loud. You know, I want it to be hitting at the radio ready level. I want, you know, my maximizer, my limiter. I want to boost my low end. I want to boost my high end. I want to cut my mids. I want to master the entire track so that when I hear it drop, I know that this is good. I know I don't need to tweak that. Like the whole track feels good to me. Things aren't out of whack. And then I will go into the nitty gritty details. So like if I was playing trumpet and I went like, like that one note right there, I may just want to turn it down or whatever. Or maybe one note got lost, you know, or this frequency is buzzing. Let me bring that down. For me, it's easier to hear those things once my track is already mastered, or like 95% mastered, like it's already there, it's already hitting strong. Then I'll work out the little tiny details. And so what a lot of people will do is they will actually do this. They'll get their EQ, they'll get their balance, they'll work out the details, and then they'll master. But because I'm doing everything myself in the box, I like this process more. I like hearing, I'll get to you in just a second, Liam, thanks for raising your hand. I like hearing everything hit really hard. And I think one of the reasons why is because it then gives me a context for the details. Like I see how the details are sitting with a track that already feels good. And so then I can feel confident in those little adjustments. Now I do want to mention also, one of the details that I do work out in number 2 is kind of like aligning vocals or aligning trumpets. You know, like when you're doing a vocal and you have the ad-libs where it's like, we are the people. And then this one's like, we are the people. And this one's like, we are the people. You know, like it's not going to be, we are the people, like perfectly. There's going to be, you know, some fluctuations. And so sometimes you want to tighten those things up. Sometimes you don't want to tighten them up as much. But when you do, like those types of edits, making sure that everything is clear, and with the trumpets, same type of thing, like da-da-da-da, like making sure all those are like perfect. I do that in number 2 as well. So just like overall refinement, you know. And then really getting everything crisp in terms of volume is what I leave for number 4. So I guess that's what you can say here, like volume plus automation, like the little automations, you know, not like if you're doing an EDM build-up and the cut and the cutoff is opening, you know, all that stuff is more creative. But like making sure the level is dialed in perfect for like this one little thing, that's what I leave for number 4. So that's the process that I take. And this workflow has really helped me get things like so fast, y'all. Like I can't even stress how fast. I'm telling you, once I finish creating the track, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go mix. And I know I'm gonna follow these 4 phases. First, I'm gonna EQ in mono, get everything going right. Once I feel good about that, I'll unfold it. And then also, this gives me points where I can be like, yo, I need a little bit of a break. Let me finish phase 1. Let me just real quick. And so like, you know, it kind of gives me these little milestones. So I know where I'm at in the process. I know how close I am to being done, you know? So sometimes when I finish phase 1, that's when I'll take 10 minutes. And then I'll come back and then I start phase 2. So it's like phase 1, EQ, frequency, mono, everything's good, cool, unfold. Phase 2, let me refine my reverbs, let me refine my delays, let me refine, you know, this effect that I have on the piano, this effect that I have on the horns, whatever it may be. And let me make sure everything is balanced following the 3 tiers: vocal instruments, supportive instruments, ear candy. Cool, we're good, awesome. Let's go into master. So now is when I'm gonna be messing with the whole track. So Usually I'm going to be boosting my low end, boost my highs a little bit, cut down the mids, the low mids, make sure that nothing is too much in there. Start to crush the, give it some stereo spread, start to crush the maximizer, start to crush the limiter. I'll put a Slate Digital FGX on there, which is a new plugin I've been messing with. Get the gain up, make sure it's hitting hard, go back and forth between the reference track to make sure everything is good. And then sometimes, I'll be like, okay, actually this snare is too loud. So I will go back to kind of a mixing thing, turn down the snare, stuff like that. But make sure everything is basically so that when it drops like money trees, Kendrick Lamar. You know what I mean? Like it drops really, really good. And then that's when I'll go in and say, okay, this one word in the vocal was too soft, or it's too loud, or these 2 bars in the verse can come down in volume, or I want to automate a little bit of a crescendo, or I want all my reverbs to cut off right before the drop, or I want this track muted. There's two, because I don't want it to hang when I get this one hit. I want the hit to be super clear, then it to be kind of a vacuum, and then those little tiny details, and then it's done, and then I feel good, That being said, this has something that's kind of come, I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with this. I'm sure I'm doing something a little bit different than some people. Everybody's workflow is going to look a little bit different, but everybody's workflow is going to have overlapping themes of like, because there's techniques that everybody follows. So everybody's going to have some overlap, but everybody's is also going to look a little bit unique. So what I would suggest that you do is that if there was anything that I said that really struck a chord with you and you said, you know what, that makes sense. I'm not doing it like that right now, but I see how that would be beneficial. And I would recommend that the next time you sit down to mix, have this in mind and practice it. And this is one of those things where it's like, okay, you do it once, whoop-de-doo. But when you do it after the 5th time, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th time, that's when you really start to see like, yo, this is really working for me. Or you start to see like, you start creating your own way of doing it. You're like, yo, I kind of took what Bruce said, but I was also doing this other thing, and like I do a blend of those two, and now it's like this is really killing for me. You know what I mean? So whatever I said that you in these 4 phases, if you resonate with anything here, take this into your workflow now. If you're doing something and you're like, I've tried that before, it didn't work, maybe try it again, because maybe with this explanation you're seeing it in a different light. But take what you like and leave what you don't. And if anything, think of your workflow in buckets. Whatever your workflow is, think about what those buckets are. Like, the 4-bucket mix, I could have said. You know what I mean? I just call them phases because I don't know, whatever. It's just a terminology that I used. Think about, when you think about your workflow in buckets, it kind of gives you those little milestones that you can go order yourself moving forward.
Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. If you like this video, definitely hit that like button below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, check out some of the other videos, because if you like this, you are going to like all of the other ones. So I'll see you in the next video. Peace.